Welcome to Your Movie Rocks, an alternate ending podcast where all movies are great movies.
Even the bad ones?
Especially the bad ones. My guest for this month is a voice many of you have probably heard before, and if you haven't, you should go back and listen to the recent archives. What are you doing here? But he is our resident music guy in so many different ways and a valued part of the alternate ending community. Zev Burrows, how you doing?
I'm good, Mandy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. All right, so for this month, we are getting out of the 2010s, finally. I was afraid we might never leave. But Zev has a very interesting pick for me. If this is your first time with us, though, a little bit about how we do things. So for every show, my guest will assign me a movie to watch, and we will discuss the movie. It's just like the 10,000 other movie podcasts that you listen to, except that there's a catch. No matter what, I am only allowed to say nice things about the movie. My guests can say whatever they want, but me, only nice things. And furthermore, only sincere nice things, not I loved it when Will Ferrell finally shut the fuck up. If I have nothing nice to say, I'm lying because every movie does something right. Anyway, we have an interesting pick for today. So, Zev, why don't we start off by you telling everybody a little bit about the movie that we are talking about and why you chose it for your Movie Rocks.
So this year, in the year of whatever this is, 2025.
Who knows?
Is a milestone. I know. This is a milestone year. We are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the year 1950. Why does that year have any significance? Well, in film history, there's fewer years that I love more than 1950, and just by virtue of having just a ton of stacked movies this year. I think in terms of world cinema, this was the year that the world really got to know Akira Kurosawa on the world stage when Rashomon burst onto the scene. This was the year of the release of the Disney Cinderella, which kind of saved the Disney Animation Studios from bankruptcy. One of many times that happened throughout history. It was their biggest hit since Snow White. It saw the showdown of two of my very favorite movies of all time at the Oscars, All About Eve, beating out Sunset Boulevard, whichever one you prefer.
Oh my God, that was a stacked year.
And there are days one over the other. I tend to go back and rewatch Sunset Boulevard more, but I am very much due for an All About Eve rewatch. It is one of my absolute favorites. But a movie that kind of got overlooked in probably its time, but has since, I think, gained classic status. I don't know about classic status at the level of Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve, is the Nicholas Ray. Nicholas Ray made at least two pictures this year. He made the one we're here to talk about today, In a Lonely Place, starring Humphrey Bogart and Nicholas Ray's then wife, Gloria Grahame. And he made another picture in 1950, just after In a Lonely Place, called Born to Be Bad, which we're not going to talk about today because I didn't offer that up. We didn't choose that. And also, I don't think that movie's very good.
I do love the title, though.
It's misleading. I will say it is very misleading, and I was disappointed when I saw it. I know. But In a Lonely Place came out the same year, and it is, well, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I will say I think it is one of probably the crown jewel of the late Humphrey Bogart period. So if we're to talk Humphrey Bogart in the last 10 years of his career, 10 years of his life, I mean, I'm going to put my cards on the table very early. I actually like it more than Treasure of the Sierra Madre. So.
Okay.
Which is a picture that I like very much. But why don't we get into what is In a Lonely Place?
Indeed. What lonely place are we in?
Exactly. So the story of In a Lonely Place, it is a very Hollywood movie. It takes place in post-war Hollywood, directly in post-war Hollywood, where Humphrey Bogart plays a down-on-his-luck screenwriter who hasn't had a hit since before the war.
Same year as Sunset Boulevard, you said.
Same year as that other down-on-his-luck screenwriter movie.
And same year as All About Eve, you say.
And same year as All About Eve. I mean, obviously this one shares more similarities and probably has more of a probably spiritual connection to Sunset Boulevard than All About Eve.
Certainly, but we're still in the general writers writing about writers writing genre.
Yeah. And you get 3 of the all-time greats in 1 year. Like, we were spoiled. I don't know how that happened in this 1 year, but we were just spoiled completely.
Sometimes you just get a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it all balances out because there are years where nothing good happens in the movies.
Exactly. So Humphrey Bogart plays a down-on-his-luck screenwriter named Dixon Steele, who hasn't had a hit before the war and who has a history of having a bad temper, which has sometimes led him to do questionable things that have, that may have cost him gigs, that may have gotten him fired off of gigs. But he is presented with a new gig to adapt a story from a novel that he has really no interest in reading. And but one night, as he heads to one of his favorite bars in Hollywood, he meets a girl who has read the book and decides that instead of reading the book, he wants her to come back to his apartment for her to tell the story to him. And early the next morning, she is found dead. He is the main culprit. We sort of know, well, maybe I shouldn't say anything, but like the whole movie is us, as he is developing this relationship with Gloria Grahame over the course of the movie, we are kind of left scratching our heads with 2 questions. Number 1, did he do it? Number 2, is he capable of doing it? And how far is he going to go in this? And how far is he going to go into his relationships? He is a very interesting character that Bogart plays. Like, I think of his very famous characters, I think it might be one of the most complex.
Yeah, as I told you before we started recording, I am woefully underseen on Humphrey Bogart movies. Like, I've seen the famous ones. I've seen Casablanca. I've seen Treasure of the Sierra Madre. I've seen a fair bit of his early stuff, but I would by no means call him a Bogart expert. In general, I find him to be a better actor the more he has to work with. And so it would make sense that this became kind of the performance that is agreed to be, if not his very best, then at least one of his top ones.
I think it's generally agreed that it is at least among his best. I think that there's still some hesitancy for a lot of people to call it his best. I think a lot of people would say Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Some people might say The Maltese Falcon. Some people might honestly say The Big Sleep. But for me, Big Sleep for me, Philip Marlowe is, his portrayal is too close to his Sam Spade, wherein I've always sort of preferred The Maltese. I mean, I love both pictures, but I've always sort of preferred, you asked me to sit down and watch one right now, I'm going to put on Maltese Falcon.
Yeah, and I love The Maltese Falcon, but honestly not for Humphrey Bogart. Like, he's certainly a good element of it, but it's such a good ensemble that I've never thought of it as a Humphrey Bogart film.
You watch that for the ensemble.
Yes, exactly.
Peter Lorre. You watch it for.
And if I'm going to pick one performer that I consider the MVP of Maltese Falcon, it's going to be Peter Lorre.
Really?
Yes.
I would say Sidney Greenstreet, but I think we can agree to disagree on that.
I mean, specifically, it's going to be Peter Lorre's eyes.
That's fair.
He's got a face.
That's fair.
But we are here.
He's got a face.
We are here, speaking of interesting faces, right out of the movie, we are here to discuss In a Lonely Place. I spent until I turned my closed captions on thinking that they had named this character Dick Steele. And I was like, they did not. Surely they did not. Even in 1950, they did not do that. And it turned out they did not, in fact, do that. His name is Dix Steele, or rather Dixon, as you said. Everybody calls him Dix. Actually, before I get started showering praise on the movie, you may or may not know the answer to this. I'm going to take a gamble. In the opening credits, I noticed a lot of famous names. And then in the list of like second tier technical people that we eventually got to, there was one name that stood out to me. It was under the credit of technical advisor, and it was Rodney Amato. Do you have any idea whether that's Garbage Pail Kids Rodney Amato?
You know, I have never seen the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
Don't?
I probably will at some point, but
don't. Life's too short.
Life's too short. Okay. I will try and quickly confirm this. Rod Amato, director of television mostly.
Yep.
Gilligan's Island among his credits. A few episodes of The Dukes of Hazzard.
Like, he'd have been young, but it wouldn't have been outlandish. And how many Rodney Amatos are there running around? But basically, I have to know how far the mighty fell when they eventually ended their career by directing Garbage Pail Kids.
But the furthest thing he has back is 1956. He was a producer on the movie Daddy-O, which I think was the first movie that John Williams scored.
Oh, interesting.
Which is a very weird piece of trivia.
Yeah, it is. It is honestly totally irrelevant to everything, because who even knows what a technical advisor does on this movie? But it was a name that stood out to me of like, there's a name I haven't seen on a good movie in a long time. But anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about things that I liked about this movie, and they were numerous. So this movie opens in a little restaurant. Well, it doesn't really open in the restaurant, but that's the first major scene that we will return to again and again. It's a restaurant called Paul's. It appears to be where Dixon Steele meets up with the remaining people in Hollywood who will still treat with him after his history of violence. And they are not many, but I really like this setting as a gathering place for these characters. And I like the work that is done early in the movie to establish this little cast of characters as they are, and also to establish Mr. Steele himself as someone who both knows what it feels like to kind of be an underdog and to be down on his luck, and therefore has developed a certain, despite his bad temper and his numerous other questionable qualities, he has also a very big soft spot for underdogs and screw-ups. And that initial meeting of him and his buddies in that restaurant establishes that really well and makes him more likable than he otherwise could be from the beginning.
Just a sidetrack, we do have a confirmation. It is the same Rod Amato.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Wow, how far the mighty fell. Okay, well, good to know he did some good things in his career. Okay.
But anyway, please continue.
But anyway, okay, back to Paul's. And speaking of underdogs and down on their luck folks, it's a nice establishing setting. It's also where Dixon Steele meets the coat check girl, Mildred Atkinson, who will turn out to be a pivotal force in his life. But before that, he gets into a fist fight over a young snot-nosed producer's son-in-law in the restaurant who is giving his friend Charlie, a washed-up actor, a hard time about Charlie's general screw-upness. And it's a good way of establishing both that he does not have a temper, that he has a very distinct mean streak, but also that he has somewhere inside a very big heart as well.
A big heart that also turns out to be, as we see later in the movie, something that doesn't work out quite so well for him. But I also don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Both of those things, the temper and the big heart, are going to get him in trouble eventually. I liked Mildred a lot. I would watch a different movie in which Mildred was a much bigger character.
Mildred Atkinson was played by Martha Stewart.
This is not the Martha Stewart.
Maybe not the Martha Stewart. A different Martha Stewart, probably.
Yeah, not Snoop Dogg's Martha Stewart. I think this was actress Martha Stewart.
Not Snoop Dogg's Martha Stewart, because her final role came in Surf Party, which I think is one of the Hollywood beach ball party movies in 1964, and after which she retired. Okay,
fascinating. Well, she certainly could have done worse than this movie. She is exactly the right mixture for this character of, like, sweet and plucky, and at the same time, really annoying. To the point where I tried really hard not to learn anything about this movie before I watched it. I am normally not very spoiler-averse, but I get that way with film noirs. But I knew pretty much from the moment she stepped on screen, like, something bad's gonna happen to her. Because we were being set up to be, like, just the tiniest bit relieved when she exited the picture. However, I would have watched an entire movie about that character.
I mean, it is film noir, and I think that, and plenty of people, including Tim, have noted in the past, film noir is not necessarily a genre that is enormously kind to women on the whole. So,
No, and this one's no exception.
and this one's no exception.
But yeah, she's a sweet little innocent who makes the mistake of agreeing to go home to Dixon Steele's apartment so that she can tell him all about the plot of the book that she just read, that he is expected to adapt into a screenplay that she really liked, and that he can tell very much that he is not going to. The standout line from this for me was her saying, "There are lots of other little plots and things that I didn't tell you," and Humphrey Bogart responding with the most deadpan, "Thank you."
Yep.
Great moment.
Yep.
This is a very funny film in places. I was not expecting it to be so funny. For a movie that gets so heavy so often, it's quite watchable.
And it's funny in very disarming places too. Like it does sometimes act as a little bit, I don't want to say a relief, but I don't know if another word to describe it as something like that.
It's a little bit uncomfortable sometimes in the places where it shows up. Like the next thing that I was going to talk about was the interrogation scene, which I think is one of the funniest ones in the movie. In part because Steele is so nonchalant about the fact that he is a murder suspect. But he almost seems to accept that this was the natural course that his life was going to take, was that eventually he was going to end up here.
Right. And it speaks to something that I want to touch on a little bit later when we get to probably the most famous scene in the movie, that he almost kind of relishes in the fact that he is seen as a murder suspect, because one of the things he points out very specifically in the movie, this is what writers live for. So, and this is what we, look to get in our pictures. So it makes perfect sense that he would just be, I don't know if relishing in the fact is the right way to put it, but he would just, it almost seems the way that Bogart plays it, it's almost like it's like just another day on the job or something.
The most generous read of the character in that moment is that he appreciates the irony of like, this is the kind of stuff that I write about all the time, and now it's really happening to me. The character does not necessarily invite the most generous reading of him. Though there are so many layers happening in Bogart's performance during that scene and so many others, that it is not even necessarily inviting any particular reading of that scene.
Right.
It is also fitting to me that he is, I don't know if he's actually arrested or just brought down to the station by his old buddy, Sergeant Nikolai, who is played by Frank Lovejoy. Is that it? And specifically his old inferior officer from when they were both serving in World War II together. Because Sergeant Nikolai never seems to feel that he can actually have any power or authority over his old commanding officer. And the fact that he feels that way about him comes back to bite him and everyone else again and again and again. And it's a really interesting relationship of like the cop who can't be a cop because of the scenario that he's in right now.
Right. And also Bogart or Dixon Steele kind of just needling him at that.
And knowing that he can, and knowing that he's going to win in any tete-a-tete that the two of them are going to have.
Right. He's somebody who's always 2 steps ahead of everybody else, except when everything falls apart.
Yeah. And also, like, Nikolai is kind of established by everyone around him, most memorably his own wife, to not actually be all that bright. So it seems like this is what everybody expects to happen as well. Like, even his boss knows that he's not going to be good at this. Speaking of Sergeant Nikolai, so I don't actually know because, as I think I mentioned, I hadn't heard of this movie until fairly recently. I don't know what the most famous scene is, and I can think of a couple of candidates for what I would pick for the most famous scene. The first one is the scene when Steele is over for dinner at Nikolai's house with him and his wife, Sylvia, and they start talking about how the murder might have happened. Is that the most famous scene? Okay.
I think that is, well, most famous. I don't know if that's a stretch, but I think that's kind of when I see publications written about this movie, or when I see screen grabs, there's the most screen grabs that I see from the movie are from that scene. Particularly one where it's a shot of Bogart and the lighting on his face.
Oh my
his face
God.
is dark, except for just like this white light going over his eyes. And not only can you see
it's so creepy.
Wrinkles, it's so creepy, but that is one of the most iconic Bogart images that nobody ever talks about. I mean, he's relishing in just the excitement of this scenario while he's watching his cop buddy, I should say, accidentally start to do something.
To strangle his own wife, basically at his command.
Right. I don't know how, I didn't know how far we were going into spoilers. So
we are entirely in spoiler zone territory. If you have not seen In a Lonely Place and you wish to, please stop now, go watch it, and then come back and join us.
There you go.
You know what I noticed the most during those close-ups was the lighting on his teeth.
His teeth are so creepily lit.
He has, like, Bogart had kind of big teeth anyway, like they're a little bit donkey teeth, and they were bared while he was talking.
I mean, there's probably a very good reason why Bogart did not make many color films, because of just how much he smoked.
That would do it.
So
I think he went through about 40 packs on the set of this movie.
I would wager he went through 30
just on screen.
Yeah, but the lighting. Oh my God, the lighting on his eyes, the lighting on his teeth.
The lighting's incredible, and I also loved that they kept cutting away from him periodically, not to Brub Nikolai, but to Sylvia, who doesn't know this guy, and who has just agreed to have him in her house. And you can tell pretty much from the moment he opens his mouth is regretting agreeing to have him in her house. And then after he almost talks her husband into nearly strangling her, the first thing she does is invite him back.
Yeah, that is the creepiest part. But also, it also, when you said it cuts back away from Bogart, when you look at Frank Lovejoy's face, he's so intensely focused on what Bogart is saying that he's just completely oblivious to how strong the grip of his arm is on his wife's neck. And it's just because he's so hypnotized by what Dixon Steele is telling him, and he just does not realize what is happening. That scene is so, if you want to talk about staging and blocking in a scene, oh my God. I mean, you could probably teach a course on just the blocking in this movie.
It's so good, and it's so scary. This movie was both much funnier and much scarier than I expected it to be, in parts, sometimes at the same time.
And I think that, Nicholas Ray is kind of called a subversive filmmaker for, I think nowadays we throw that word around. We throw around subversion a lot, but you watch one of his movies, and even if you don't like it, there's certain Nicholas Ray movies I don't like. Born to be Bad is one of them. I actually don't really like Rebel Without a Cause very much.
Oh, interesting.
But his movies, they just shock you in ways that you're so. I mean, when I watch it, you're Sergeant Nikolai. You don't realize what he's doing. You don't realize what he's doing because you are so utterly captivated by what's happening, and then you take a step back and you go, holy shit, what did I
then he rattles
watch?
you out of it, and it's like, oh, yeah, exactly what you just said. What did I just watch?
Right.
And then you invite him right back in.
And this is probably my favorite example of that. I know some people would probably say Johnny Guitar is his best movie.
Haven't seen it, so can't comment.
I don't know how much I would be compelled to argue. I don't agree. It's a fabulous movie. That's also due for a rewatch. But, oh my God, you just want to talk about how quietly he just sneaks up on you.
Yeah, it's first little bit that gave me the chills. And also maybe not first establishment, but early powerful establishment of the hypnotic power that Steele is capable of having, not just through his writing. We don't even really see that much of his writing, but merely through his presence on both men and women.
Yeah.
after he leaves, of course, Sylvia snaps right back out of it. The actress playing her is apparently named Jeff Donnell. I don't know that I've ever seen her in anything, or at least I don't recognize her from anything else. But she's really good. Like, everybody in this movie is really good. They're all being overshadowed by Bogart, but it's fine. They're all good. There's not really a weak link in the cast.
No.
And she's very sweet and charming. And she has a very funny line where she's talking to her husband, who clearly has an inferiority complex when it comes to his relationship with Dix. And she tells him, well, I'm glad you're not a genius. I like you just the way you are, attractive and average. And what a nice thing for him to hear after that creepy night that they've had.
You know, I think in the 1950s, that was probably something that was very relieving to hear.
Indeed. So. I'm sure it was relieving to hear, you don't have to be Humphrey Bogart. We like you just the way you are. And, I am, of course, far from the first person to say this sort of thing. I think it's probably one of the standard readings of the movie, is that Nicholas Ray, in his subversiveness as a filmmaker, is kind of doing a deconstruction of the Humphrey Bogart role. Like, what would the Humphrey Bogart guy that he frequently plays be like if you actually tried to be his friend, or even worse, his girlfriend in real life?
No, I think I think that there's something I didn't point that out in my Letterboxd review in my most recent rewatch from a couple nights ago, but I did point that out in my little blurb. Like, I have a favorite movies list, and this is very, very much in that. And I think I said almost the exact same thing, that he wants to do like a deconstruction of the Bogart tough guy. And I think it's something that Bogart was more or less completely on board with, because In Lonely Place also has the feeling of the glory days of High Sierra and the Maltese Falcon being long over. Even though like he had only made his most recent movie with his then wife Lauren Bacall. He had only made his most recent movie with her just 2 years prior. I think Key Largo was the final one in their movies that they did together. I think they made
that sounds
4.
right.
They may have made more, but Key Largo came out 2 years before this one. But it kind of also, I mean, there was a point where I think just after Casablanca, Bogart became number 1 on Warner Brothers roster and was the highest paid actor in the world. And this kind of has the feeling of those days also being very much a thing of the past. I don't know if they were at the time of this film's production, but it has that feeling.
He wasn't doing Crazy Eyes and baring his teeth in Casablanca. He's in the experimental part of his career.
He's in the experimental part of his career, and he would only win his only Oscar the very next year for The African Queen, which I think is a completely overrated movie, and this is so much better.
It's like very okay. Like, I think it's one of those movies that Letterboxd hates more than it actually hates. But it's kind of a snooze. And I mean, no question. Like, this is so much more worthy of the Oscar than the performance. He's clearly gunning for one here in some places, and people always win their Oscars for the wrong roles anyway. It's fine. Speaking of Lauren Bacall, because I know that for a while Bogart was agitating for her to get this role, though I think we can probably agree that the right actress did get this role. We have not even talked at all about Laurel Gray, the other lead in this movie. So Laurel Gray is a neighbor of Dixon Steele's, who they live in this apartment complex that appears to have only one person per apartment in all of them. And they're very nice apartments, though there is also like an iron gate in the middle of Dixon Steele's apartment, which is a touch that I love. But when he is coming home with Mildred, they kind of pass like ships in the night, though she makes it very clear to him as they are passing that she notices him and that she sees him. And she is also the provider of his alibi during the big interrogation scene, because she can place him being at home around the time, so she says at least, around the time that poor Mildred was being dumped into Laurel Canyon. And so afterwards, they decide they'd like to get to know each other a little better, and so begins the romantic portion of the movie, because these two people have clearly felt a distant attraction to each other for quite some time, and have decided to use this very bizarre occasion to become closer to each other. Gloria Grahame is so good.
She's so good.
Like, I know we just said Humphrey Bogart's overshadowing everybody, but I'm actually not sure that he's overshadowing her. You can also kind of tell that Nicholas Ray was in the middle of getting divorced from her.
Yeah. For a very, and it kind of, and I read a little bit more into it, it kind of escalated in very weird and warped ways between Nicholas Ray and Gloria Grahame, which we won't go into right now, but...
Yep. Only nice things, only nice things.
Only nice things. But I sometimes wonder if this is his greatest on-screen romance. I sometimes wonder. I mean, right from the get-go, like, she has this line, I said yours was a face I liked, it not necessarily a face I wanted to kiss. Mm-hmm. And that's just kind of, it's something that we wouldn't even dream of somebody saying that to Bogart 8 years earlier. We wouldn't dream of hearing Ingrid Bergman say that to him.
Certainly not.
But it's kind of, I mean, I'm sure in 1950 that was, it might be a little thing, but it's kind of always something that stuck out to me as something that said, there's something here,
mm-hmm.
you know?
You can smell the cigarette smoke on both their breath through the screen. And I do actually mean that as a compliment.
It's something that you do not want to get in the middle of. You don't want to separate.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. And it's something that you want so much more out of. And so it's something, just the little time it's allotted, it's something just to be appreciated so much more.
Yeah, and for the brief period of time that it's allowed to proceed uninterrupted, like, the romance is lovely. You want them to succeed during the honeymoon period, but this is film noir, so you know it's not going to last, but you still want it to.
Right.
Because they're so madly in love with each other.
They are, and it's like once she comes into his life,
mm-hmm.
if she steps out of it, he could never properly function again.
Certainly.
And even if, I mean, I probably might, I hesitate in making the same case for her, but I don't know. I may be convinced that it's very much the same.
Gloria Grahame, I think, is playing her as a woman who has been through enough to know better, and yet chooses to ignore what she knows.
Yes. That is a very good way of putting it.
Because you can tell this woman's seen a bit. You can tell this is not her first rodeo, and yet,
they say that, like,
mm-hmm.
This Mr. Baker character.
Yeah, he's her rebound.
Yeah.
He's her rebound from Mr. Baker, the real estate broker. And the part in the famous scene where, after him almost causing her strangulation, Sylvia immediately invites Dixon Steele back whenever he wants, she even says, is a good foreshadowing of the way that the romance with Dixon Steele will in fact cause Laurel Gray to forget everything she knows that should cause her to run screaming in the other direction.
Very much so.
And yes, so they have a lovely, uninterrupted, beautiful, maybe this will actually work out romance for about 10 minutes of screen time before everything goes to pot.
But even in that 10 minutes of screen time, it's like we see very clearly that he's had this dry spell, and suddenly something has just been awakened in him that just, brings his creative spirit back to life, and obviously amused, but the way that it plays out and the way that they deliver it in dialogue is so very touching.
It is. And the audience surrogate, his agent, Mel, is clearly over the moon that this woman has entered his life.
Oh my god. Oh, Mel.
Oh, Mel.
God. That scene towards the end, that scene breaks my heart.
It's so...
Maybe even more than the final scene. I almost started crying when that happened because I was just so upset. And the way, the last thing, Bogart keeps saying to him, Dix keeps saying to Mel, remind me to get you a new tie. And that's the very last thing he says to him.
That is the scene where Nicholas Ray is being the biggest asshole to the audience.
Yes. But it's just, that's for me, that's the moment where it goes from, God, this is a great movie, to, this needs to be in the Pantheon. Like, holy shit.
Yeah. And of course, because this is film noir, it cannot last. And the moment at which it all falls apart was one of the other, well, right before that, there's another line that I love. I love a picnic, acres and acres of sand, and all of it in your food. I hate picnics, and that line spoke to my heart. I don't understand. I live near the beach, and I don't understand how people eat on the beach.
You know, if I'm going to have a picnic, I'll go to Central Park or something.
Why would you have a picnic in sand? No, that's what you should do. Like, there will still be ants, but at least there will be no sand. Anyway, right. Their picnic is interrupted by the revelation that Laurel has been talking to the police again. Poor Sylvia and her big mouth, because they're out with Braub and Sylvia again. And then we go into the drive.
Oh, God, the drive.
Oh, my God, the drive. When I said this was a horror movie, I was thinking about the drive.
This is the point where, even for film noir, this leads us down some dark roads.
Literal and figurative.
Literal and figurative, yeah. This scene. Tell us a little bit more about this scene.
Oh my God. So Dixon finds out that Laurel's been talking to the police again. He doesn't like that. His temper gets the better of him in a really big way. He stalks off from their little beachside picnic with the Nikolai couple. Starts trying to drive away in their convertible. Laurel makes what in retrospect was the not very good decision to jump in the car with him and try to calm him down. And he then just starts driving like a maniac all over the deepest, darkest parts of the woods surrounding Hollywood. And we go back and forth between just shots of the road flying by and then shots of them in the car. Gloria Grahame looks like both scared out of her mind and trying very poorly to hide it. And, like, I was not sure she was going to make it out of that scene alive.
You know, if they hadn't hit the other car, she might not have.
That is true. She may have been saved by them hitting the other car, which then he gets into a fight with the driver of the other car and almost beats his skull in with a rock. So after that point...
And probably would have if she wasn't screaming at him.
Yep. So after that point, the tenor of their relationship changes very much.
Very much so. And she remains unsure if he is actually guilty of Mildred Atkinson's murder.
Yeah, that's around the point when the movie is suddenly like, hey, remember how this guy is still kind of a murder suspect? Like, really? Like, we haven't told you he didn't do it.
Right.
Also, when he puts his arm around her shoulder in the car, oh my God.
That was...
I could feel my own shoulders grow tense. And also the way that even after this happens, like, this man has done so many inexcusable things at this point, and everybody around him still continues to insist that he's a good guy and they can explain away his behavior, or they can at least excuse his behavior. Laurel does it, Mel does it, Nikolai does it, his actor friend does it, his other friends do it. Like, the only one who's willing to kind of see things as they are is Laurel's masseuse, and she gets thrown out of the apartment for her trouble.
And also the captain of the police captain.
Oh, yes, the captain, too, but nobody listens to him.
Nobody listens.
Nobody listens to the police captain.
Well, for good reasons.
Indeed. Because it turns out that he's wrong. And, you know, Dixon Steele isn't actually a murderer. He's everything else, but he's not a murderer. And so we continue on we race towards the end at this point. There is a proposal. Everybody's been talking about how these two should get married. Everybody continues after the drive when it takes on a much darker tone to talk about how they should get married. Dixon proposes to Laurel. She accepts. She very clearly does not want to accept, but she is also very clearly terrified of what he might do to her if she does not accept. And then she starts trying to run away from him. So he wants to go get married in Vegas. She is trying to catch a secret flight to New York. And when he discovers this, they have their final confrontation where he nearly kills her, but is deterred at the last second by a phone call from the police letting him know that he's finally been cleared. And my understanding is that this was very different from the original ending of the movie. Like, they shot a different ending in which he actually, and I understand this is the way that the book that it's based on, Dorothy Hughes' novel, ends as well. Though in the novel, he's also apparently actually a murderer, like a serial murderer. But in the original ending, he does kill Laurel, And then when the police show up to arrest him, he's still very nonchalant about it. And he delivers that final line about how, like, I lived a few weeks while you loved me, that comes back a couple of times. And then Nicholas Ray wasn't happy with it, so he and Bogart and Grahame basically pulled the new ending out of their asses and then shot it. And that's the ending that we see in the movie. It's a lot better this way.
I think so too. And for me, it would have been a little too close. And maybe this is a out of left field comparison, but it would have come a little too close to the ending of Double Indemnity. But
definitely.
I like this ending because of what she says over the phone. This would have meant so much more if you had told us yesterday. This would have meant everything to us. Yeah. So the fact that both of them are living with this now, basically two completely shattered human beings at this point. Who knows if they're going to continue living in, the same apartments as they are? Who knows if...
Like, how could they? I don't think they could ever see each other again without it shattering them some more.
Oh, yeah. I think that this ending it obviously wraps up our story, but it also forces us to confront with, well, what does happen to both of them? Because if they had gone with the original ending, one of them's dead, one of them goes to jail,
that's boring.
It's boring and it's been done. The scarier part is what happens to both of these people. And, and it's left up to us to decipher that and to figure that out, which to me is so much more haunting.
Mm-hmm. Like, I fully believe he's actually going to go kill somebody.
He could go kill somebody. He also might be, this might also lead him down a path, a self-destructive path where he might also just start drinking himself to death. We don't really know. He's not as much of a drinker, ironically, in this movie as much as he is in Casablanca. But
no, I even think the movie goes out of its way not to let us blame the way he is on his drinking.
Exactly.
And
but, it's something like this that could lead him down that path. If you want to talk about earth-shattering events, this versus what happens to his relationship with Ilsa in Casablanca before they reunite when she leaves him in Paris. Spoiler alert for Casablanca. I mean, but spoiler if you haven't somehow seen Casablanca.
I was going to say, I think everybody who is listening to this has either seen Casablanca or it's their fault that they haven't seen Casablanca.
Right. To me, this is like the weird, warped mind of Nicholas Ray. Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah. And they end, as the title would say, in the very loneliest of places.
Mm-hmm. I was born when she kissed me. Yep. I died when she left me. I lived a few weeks while she loved me.
Ay. It's like both romantic and really creepy.
Sometimes that makes... sometimes that combination makes the best movies.
It is true. Okay, are we... I'm sure we could probably talk about this for another hour if we wanted to, but in the interest of everybody's time, are we about wrapped on that?
I mean, we've only touched on just what a well-built and what a well-crafted movie this is. But I think we talked a little bit about it in the dinner scene where he's going through how the murder would take place and talking about lighting a little bit. But, I mean, I have nothing. This is such an exceedingly well-crafted movie.
It sure is.
And I'm just kind of talking out of my ass here a little bit.
It's all right. Okay, so Go ahead, sorry.
No. I was just going to ask, how much did you really like the movie?
I was going to say, I don't think it's going to be a shock to anybody that I genuinely did like this movie. But how many stars do you think I'm at?
I am hoping for a 4.5, but I would put you at a 4, maybe.
Okay. I'm at a 4.5. And honestly, if I watched it again in a little while, I could see myself going down, but I think I could see myself more likely going up to a 5. I am not the only thing that it really has working against me for it right now is that I'm inherently, and this was a thing that Sunset Boulevard did too, and I still love Sunset Boulevard, but I'm inherently not a fan of that thing where the only thing writers write about is writers writing. I remain confused about how many celebrity screenwriters Hollywood actually had in the 1940s and 50s. because the movies that they write would have us believe that there were many. But it's kind of like writers disappearing up their own butts, which, they do. But I kind of rolled my eyes when I realized that that's what we were getting into. But I forgave it really quickly once the movie really started going.
Well, I think to Sunset Boulevard, and also to this movie's credit, I think probably more in the case I could probably defend of Sunset Boulevard is, they say he says this at the very beginning in his monologue, just a movie writer with a couple of B pictures to his credit, someone who is very much not a celebrity. But the funny thing about it is that they kind of both is that they both got in jokes, Sunset Boulevard and In a Lonely Place. They both got in jokes about studio execs turning down Gone with the Wind.
Yep, I noticed that too.
I was like, who was in the story department in both movies?
Someone who either really loved Gone with the Wind or worked on Gone with the Wind, or who even knows. Somebody. It's a good joke. It's a good joke, even if it's in two movies. Okay, well, thank you so much for introducing me to this movie. I feel like my life is a better place now with this movie in it. I wish I could say the same thing for... Is it in a less lonely place? I don't know about that, but I am very happy to have watched this movie. I was a little worried that this was going to get boring when we're doing, guess what? The good movie is good, but movie gave us so much to talk about that I had fun. I hope you did too.
I had a blast talking about it, and I had a blast just rewatching it, especially after watching so many adaptations of Snow White last month. Jesus Christ.
Oh, good Lord, I'm so sorry.
Don't ask me why. But I think, to go back on that, those were two of the movies that I suggested to 2010 adaptations of Snow White.
They were, and, well, perhaps you will have to come back at some point.
Perhaps you'll have to come back.
And maybe when you do, it will be Snow White time.
But I think this is a much more satisfying movie to talk about, at the very least, than either Mirror, Mirror or Snow White and the Huntsman. Oh,
it's so good. Okay.
It's so good.
Well, that was a great deal of fun. I hope you all out there in Listenerland had a great deal of fun with us. Zev, if people want to find more of either your movie opinions or your regular work, where can they find you?
You can find my website as zevburrowsmusic.com. I regularly update SoundCloud from time to time, but I'm always working on stuff. I just finished up a couple of projects that I hope to talk more about as they come about. I literally just finished up stems and work on a film just last week. So hopefully I'll be able to talk about that a little more, but I would like to keep my Letterboxd a secret.
Okay, then we will keep your Letterboxd a secret. But yes, go find Zev's music. It's great. I listened to a production. I watched the production of Macbeth that he scored a while ago, but I also listened to the music, and the music was really good.
Oh my God, thank you. That was so long ago. Oh, those were memories.
Oh, time flies. Okay, well, that has been In a Lonely Place on Your Movie Rocks. If you have not yet joined us, either in the alternate ending Discord, where we have lots of fun chatting about movies and other stuff, or if you are inclined to throw some financial support our way, you can also check out the Patreon. The comments section is also a place where we sometimes hang out. Basically, come and find us and join our community in whatever way you would like to, because we would love to talk about great movies with you as well. I will catch you next month.
And bad movies.
And bad movies, except none of them are bad movies. They're all good. I will catch you all next month, and Zev and I will both catch you on the Mothership podcast. Catch you guys next time.